Hi everyone. I've been asked to give a few musical suggestions during this lockdown, and I did think initially of just naming the longest sequences of works I could think of in order to help you pass the time. And you may want to do this anyway and set yourself the challenge of listening to all of Haydn's symphonies, for example, or every Bach cantata. And this would indeed be an excellent use of your time and would allow one to witness the variety of ideas and musical invention encased within these extensive compositional projects. But I've chosen instead to recommend some works which might provide solace and joy in a decidedly anxiety-inducing time. I'm starting with a minimalist work from the 1970s. Minimalism is an approach which some listeners despise with a true visceral passion, so it might seem like a slightly strange place to begin. But for me, such pared down music is the perfect way of silencing external noise and chatter, which can sometimes feel unwanted and intrusive. So Steve Reich's Variations for Winds, String and Keyboards is perhaps one of his purest instrumental works, a 20-minute cleanse which has very few dramatic contrasts or shouty musical events. It's a stratified work, with the wind instruments providing the fastest notes in the ether above sustained violins and keyboards. At regular intervals, brass chords break upon the textures in a rich, rolling manner. One can easily imagine these sonorities as distinct layers of colour, and if one were being even more whimsical, one could picture the clean-cut, abutting rectangles you find in a tulip field. Anyway, here you can lose yourself in listening to these aural tulip fields, just wallowing in texture and colour. And in fact, some people who like to work to music might find this scenic monotony a useful aid to reading or thinking. It doesn't disturb or awaken. Personally, I find the opposite, which is the seeming uniformity gives way to a perception of minute alterations in the harmonic language, which happen slowly and discreetly, as though under the radar, inviting you to find them out. And the more one listens, the more rhythmic playfulness one hears. Syncopations, for example, which at first might have been unregistered, become the lifeblood of the music, appearing in every layer and every temporal plane. So, if you like that work, I would also recommend two other minimalist works. One is Louis Andriesen's opera Writing to Vermeer, and the other is recomposed by Max Richter. And this latter reworking of Vivaldi's Four Seasons seems to be everywhere at the moment. I noticed it, for example, as the accompanying music to a scene in The Crown in which Princess Margaret escapes the confines of her gilded cage. Images of her clambering onto a motorcycle behind Tony Armstrong led to a perfect synergy with the strains of pulsating minimalist strings. Euphoria on a bike, indeed. And the other piece I mentioned, Writing to Vermeer, is a rather cool Dutch kind of minimalism which incorporates a far greater range of musical references than other works in this style. It's a take on the story of the artist Vermeer and his complex relationships with the women in his life, his wife, his mother-in-law, and his model Saskia. It's a set of relationships which was also made famous by the novel and film The Girl with the Pearl Earring. And the soundscape here is disjunct, using frequent repetitions of small cells of discordant ideas, and the use of piercing high-range instruments is notable, and it has quite a chiselled melodic line. In addition, there are some quotations from the 16th century, as well as very contemporary interjections of electronic music. So it's a collage which seems at first slightly disorientating, perhaps even surreal, but with repeated listening begins to develop a myriad of textures and stories which operate across the breadth of the work. It's a complexity which perhaps is appealing when we've got a fair amount of time to dedicate to listening and thinking. And then another final opera I'd like to recommend is Mozart's Marriage of Figaro. Particularly, I would recommend the version conducted by John Eliot Gardner with Bryn Terfel as Figaro, which is available in all its glories on YouTube. And I've chosen this work because we sometimes need a pure psychological boost, and where better than in this opera, where the musical language mirrors the farcical complexity of the plot. It's a story of desire, of class exploitation and class retribution, of mistaken identity and gender politics of the late 18th century. So there's something for everyone. And it's not at all dry or academic, but just endlessly melodic and dexterous in its harmonic handling. Every scene seems to contain a musical pearl. And it is also clever in the sense that there is often a lot going on texturally, and it's a work which I wouldn't recommend for background listening, but something in which to immerse oneself, to luxuriate in, both in its musical and dramatic characterization. So there we have a few recommendations, some minimalism, some opera buffa, which seems like a suitably varied diet. And I look forward to exchanging ideas with others who are also constructing their own lockdown lists, and hope very much that everyone stays well.